I'm Shelby Furling. I'm a junior this year in the College of Agriculture, studying Ag Business Management with a minor in Animal Science.
I'm Faye Pan. I'm a senior in Landscape Architecture program.
I'm Sarah Hale, and I'm a senior in Wildlife Sciences.
I'm Mindy Nelson, and I'm a junior studying agribusiness with a focus in food marketing.
I'm Austin Gottschalk, and I am a junior here at Purdue, majoring in animal science, concentration in animal agribusiness.
Our service learning project has consisted of working closely with the YWCA in Lafayette to help serve domestic violence victims and to raise awareness. This is an issue that some people don't always consider, and it happens more frequently than what people think. We have done quite a bit of research on this topic, and we are now more familiar with the issue. Our goal was to help spread the word here on campus and throughout the local community. We focused on gender issues throughout domestic violence to see if it occurs more male versus females or mentally versus physically.
Our emergent plan was to understand the victims and some of the things they went through. We found out what resources they used to get help and struggles they had along the way. By immersing ourselves as one of them, we have a much better understanding of what goes on during a domestic violence case in the eyes of a victim. We have contacted the local YWCA. We spoke to 2 different ladies that helped us tremendously with the project. We were given many flyers and feedback about who, what, and why they serve the victims. They do have many different education programs at the YWCA, such as the Domestic Violence Intervention and Prevention Program, which provides services such as domestic violence hotline, where victims can call at any time to talk to someone about their problems, or the teen dating safety resources, legal advocacy, emergency shelter for them to get away from their abusers, or free support groups.
Once we understood how the YWCA interacts with the victims, we then began to fulfill our immersion project. Our service learning part of the project was each group member took part in volunteer work at the emergency shelter in downtown Lafayette. This shelter is provided for women to go if they have an emergency and need to get away from their abuser. When we volunteered, we were able to spend some time with the victims' children. We played games with them, helped them with homework, and played many games of hangman, which was their favorite. We were able to see the outcomes of the children who are put through the shelter, as well as their mothers who lived in the shelter when they came and picked up the children. Although we were not able to come in direct contact with the victims, we received great feedback from the employees who worked closely with them.
Being on a large, diverse college campus, we decided that this topic of domestic violence would best fit our project. It happens more often than most think. Others need to become aware of the issues. We wanted to help others know where to go if they became a victim of violence and how to prevent it in the future. The purpose of our project was to help ourselves become aware of what happens during a domestic abuse case. In return, we are now able to reach out to our local community and let others know what is happening. We learned how it feels to be in a situation and realize the effects and actual outcomes of these issues.
Our topic is domestic violence and abuse, so our group picked $1 Million Baby to be part of our cultural immersion project. As shown on our problem tree, one of the causes is gender discrimination. In the movie, Frank Don, the experienced boxing trainer, didn't accept to train Maggie at first because he didn't train any girls. Frank thought being a waitress was a better job for a girl than being a boxer. But Maggie finally convinced Frank and became a great boxer and won the champion. The movie conveys an idea that no jobs are born for either men or women, and they all have the equal chance to pursue their dreams, and everyone should respect each other. Gender is absolutely not an excuse for violence and abuse. $1 Million Baby is centered on a world of boxing, but also a world of friendship, love, and faith. The movie gives us the chance to really think about our society and also points out various directions for our cultural immersion project.
I had an interview with Officer Christopher Leroux. He's Deputy Chief in charge of operations. And some assumptions you can think of is women getting abused more than men, which is true, but the male is getting abused more frequently now, so that's kind of assumption versus facts. One of the first things I asked Chris was, is men or women being abused more, which is kind of what I just said. But he said right now there's a lot more female-related cases that they have, but the male cases are starting to increase because of the change in society. Women are having more power, and you have you have more abuse against men. That also ties into my next question, because we're on the campus, we're on Purdue campus, and such a diverse, school. Being near a campus, does that cause more domestic violence? And he responded with 3/4 of the calls they have are between the age of 18 to 26, because they just get in a really bad argument. Sometimes there is abuse, so they have to report it. One of the biggest reasons he feels like the age range is most popular is because of young love. We have all the bars on campus, so these kids go out, they go partying, start drinking and whatever, and then they go home to their spouse, or, if they're married, or their girlfriend, and she went out with some of her friends, and, they just get in a big argument, and sometimes, you have your abuse, male or female. So I also asked him, since we are doing this learning tool, what do you recommend how we spread domestic violence? And he responded that there's not really a good way to spread it, because people shouldn't abuse anyone. Like, that's just innate. Like, no one should do that, and it's just not the right thing to do. It's like, it really starts when you're at home. If you come from a home where domestic violence was taking place, yeah, you're more likely to be an abuser when you get older, but it's just not the right thing to do. So it's really home life at the beginning. Also, the people that aren't from the United States, or that are here as not exchange students, but studying in the United States, they come from a different culture, and so it might be okay to hit your woman, or not beat her, but smack her around to get a point across. And they just need to know that in the U.S., you can't do that. It's against the law. It's against the law and stuff like that. The last thing I asked him was, what's the usual procedure on your domestic violence calls? And he answered with, they usually arrive at the house, separate the two parties, and get both sides of the stories. They check for abuse, and if there is abuse, they automatically get jail time. Sometimes there is double abuse, they both beat each other, so both of them get jail time. If male get abused, they can shake it off, go somewhere, talk with family. But with the women, we have the YWCA, and they have that hotline number. They could call they can call the cops at first. They can get counseling. They should go visit their parents or something like that, just to get help and get away from that abuser. So now that was the interview, and Shelby is going to talk about the YWCA. Thanks.
Okay, so this is a picture of myself and Erica at the YWCA. When me and Faye went there, we had an interview with her, and she is the operations manager, which oversees the shelter, and she is also the volunteer coordinator at the YWCA. And some main points that she really that really stood out to me when she talked to me was the male versus female abusers. It occurs in both genders, although the YWCA just provides housing for the women and the children only. So the male abusers don't stay there, so they don't provide as much information. They only provide them as contact information to get help elsewhere. And also physical versus mental abuse, she touched a lot on. This occurs in both physical and mental abuse, more mental than physical. And verbal is most difficult for the victims because they're blamed by their abusers, and then they must make a decision of whether to stay or to leave after being verbally threatened, and most of the time it's a really tough decision for them. And so that's what the YWCA and what Erica does, is provide information for all of the victims in order to get them help.
When I went to do the interview with Shelby the other day, Erica, the volunteer program coordinator, gave us many flyers talking about domestic violence intervention and prevention programs in the YWCA. So from the flyers, we learned 4 different abusive behaviors, such as punching, destroying things, which are violent behaviors, and criticizing, shaming, blaming are hurtful behaviors. Shouting, not allow the partner to go to work or school, are types of controlling behaviors. Mistrusting, lying are disconnecting behaviors. We also learned that violence is generational, which means that the pattern of violence experienced in your family can be passed on to your children. Violence is a learned behavior. When children witness repeated violence in the home, they begin to accept this behavior as normal. But the good thing is, domestic violence does not have to be passed on. When children and teens are exposed to nonviolent adult role models, they are taught nonviolent problem-solving skills and can increase their self-confidence. The cycle of violence is eventually unlearned when the child is given positive guidance. After learning this negative effects on children, our group planned to volunteer at YWCA to play with children from the shelter and the neighborhood.
In order to immerse ourselves in our cultural project, we decided to volunteer at the YWCA. At the YWCA, they have a lot of programs to help the women. One of their programs is kind of like a child daycare system, and what we did was we went in and decided to hang out with the kids while the women had some alone time for a couple hours. While we were there, we got to play games with the kids, and they had a lot of fun, and that's all they really need is just someone to play with them and pay attention to them. We also helped them with their homework or any other thing that they need. They attempted to have like a talking session where the children could talk about their feelings and how they're feeling that day, but that didn't really work with the children who were too young because they just didn't want to talk about their feelings in the open. So they focused more on just making them happy and having a positive relationship with other people. And here we have one of our members, Austin, and the lady said that they needed more male volunteers because these children, as you can imagine, they don't get much positive male influence in their lives. So any male influence that they have that they can just have fun with, just day-to-day contact anytime would be very good for them, because so they can realize that not every man is bad or mean or has to abuse a woman.
I volunteered at a YWCA twice, and what I did was helping them sort all the donations and move them into the shelter. You can't imagine how many kinds of donations they have. They have canned food, cereals, and Pampers in different sizes. And I also help sterilize all the toys for kids, and these toys are also from donations. What I learned from my volunteer experience was kids are innocent, and they should not be the victims of domestic violence and abuse. The society should raise the awareness of domestic violence and abuse to give positive guidance to children. Just don't let it pass on to the next generation. Also, I was surprised to see that so many donations are well used in YWCA. I personally donate things pretty often, but I never know where the donations really go. But this time I realized that little help from people really can make a big difference. And these donations will also show our support and love to those victims to help them stand up again and fight for their new lives.
So October was Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and the color for domestic violence awareness is purple. So what we did was we made these bracelets, these beautiful purple bracelets, and we all wore them around school for that month and tried to raise awareness by just showing everyone our bracelets and letting them know that's Domestic Violence Awareness Month, but that way just spreading the news that this does happen to people and there are places you can go. We also handed out flyers to anyone who was walking by, who was interested, and we stopped people and we were just like giving them some information about domestic violence, and we also posted them up on our lovely pin boards that we have around campus so that people could stop and read, and if they know anyone who's going through domestic violence, that they know where to go now, and hopefully this will help eliminate the problem or help people who were not previously aware to get some help that they need.
So as part of our project, we spent an afternoon on campus. We kind of took some time to hand out some flyers about domestic violence. This was the flyer. This is kind of what it looked like. It just talks about the different kind of abuse, like emotional abuse, sexual abuse, things like that, that men can do to women and how it affects them and stuff like that. And the guy in this picture that Shelby and I are talking to, I gave him a flyer, kind of told him what our project was about and different things like that. He walked away, we did more flyers, and pretty soon he came back a couple minutes later and started asking us questions. And the first thing he asked was, well, this is just directed towards women. Like, what can we do? He was asking us, like, how do these women get help with the YWCA? Because we told him about how they can go there. Austin ended up telling him about his interview with the police department and how they kind of both interact together to get the women help. So it was really kind of interesting that this random guy that we just handed out a flyer to came back, and we spent a good 10 minutes talking to him and answering all of his questions about it.
Okay, so right here is a picture of Alpha Chi Omega's annual philanthropy called Sumo Slam, and I attended it. And basically what they do is they pair up with another fraternity, ZBT, and they raise money. Different sororities and fraternities can come, and they dress in these silly sumo costumes, but all of the money that they raise for the entry fees and everything, as you can see, there was quite a large attendance. And the money that they raise goes directly to the YWCA to help support, mainly, sometimes it'll go to the Domestic Violence Intervention Program, or any donations or anything that they need at the YWCA. So I really thought that was an awesome program that they were doing, especially since it was helping support what our project was about. And a little bit more to reflect on what the victims go through. In the interview, Erica mentioned the steps that the victims go through when they're abused. First, they can call the 24/7 shelter crisis hotline explaining their issue, and then the women can stop by the shelter, and they're going to be given an assessment and a sex offender check, and the YWCA checks for the available space that they have at the shelter to make sure that they have enough room for them to stay there. And the women and children can stay at the shelter for up to 30 days. The shelter has single beds and room for families, but obviously they don't house any older men. It's just for the women and their children. And during their stay, the YWCA provides meetings to empower the women to get a job, to help their kids get back in school, to find a house. They're only there for support, like Erica was explaining to me. They don't make decisions for the victims. They just listen and try to problem solve and provide positive feedback for the victims. And here's just another flyer that Erica gave me for the Domestic Violence and Intervention Program and Prevention. And she said that she gives, like, every victim that comes in, she gives them a packet about stuff, that the hotline they can call, the advocacy if they need to have legal advice, the education, adult education, and for the children, and support and outreach. Just a lot of good information that we really tried to spread around campus to help get the word out there and raise awareness.
So if you have been abused, make sure you know you can call the police. There is a hotline for domestic violence that the YWCA has, and there's a crisis center or shelter in Lafayette that you can get hold of too if you need help. Just make sure you get away from your abuser and you get counseling or get that help so you can help yourself and for your family or kids if you have them.
So in conclusion, we appreciate having the opportunity to become immersed in a domestic violence issue.
After our project was completed, we felt we made a connection with what the victims go through and the struggle they have.
We want to thank the YWCA for allowing us to come to there for interviews, providing us with information, and volunteer service hours with the Domestic Violence Intervention Program.
Also, we would like to thank the Purdue Police Department for their feedback on the issue of domestic violence and giving us some great information to help us raise awareness on campus.
Thanks to all group members for participating, and we now have a better understanding and feel as if we have helped make a small positive impact on this issue. So thanks.